Very good, Kaya. Congratulations. Awesome job. I'll start with the questions here. Okay, first, what would you say, first off, what is, if you could clarify, what is the difference between an opiate and an opioid?
So an opiate is a natural derivative of the opium poppy. And so it's completely natural. There's nothing synthesized. It's drugs such as morphine and heroin. Whereas an opioid is completely chemically produced. It's chemically modified in order to fit specific needs. This is things like Percocet, codeine, and Vicodin.
So the ones prescribed mostly,
Yeah.
right? Okay, what would you say to someone who's had just like a major surgery, like a knee replacement or something like that, who's just in massive amounts of pain and the Tylenol's not cutting it? Yeah.
As I mentioned earlier, that people who come right out of a surgery can have access to opioids. I understand that they're going through intense and like really bad pain that I can't imagine because I haven't been through. But I think that yes, they can have opioids, or as I mentioned, Subutex, which is a form of painkiller that is non-addictive. And that way they will feel the relief with that one and not become addicted. But with the opioids, they can be given small doses, not enough to create an addiction off of. And if an addiction does form, they can be weaned off of it using the other medication.
Okay. In your research, have you seen other countries, industrialized countries, who use opioids? Okay, a couple questions. Why is America so bad? And what other countries could we compare to? And maybe, is there something that some sort of protocol or something that they're using that we're not, that we could learn from them to also curb the abuse?
Well, I think that we as Americans have become very impatient. In that if we try to watch a YouTube video and it takes more than about 5 seconds to load, we usually click out of it. And so because of that, a lot of times we don't want to wait for our bodies to naturally heal themselves. We'd rather just take a pill that makes the pain go away. I think that in that sense, we've kind of become babies to pain. And so in my thesis paper, I mentioned Japan's statistics, and that if you doubled the amount of opioids that Japan consumes 5 times, then they would still be lower than America in overconsumption. And so I think that America, the land of the free, you can do what you want, kind of. Japan is much more strict than that. And so I think that being more strict on the distribution, being more strict on the amount given out can all help reduce the problem.
Okay. Okay. Actually, my time's up. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree that healthcare is a very complicated and sometimes inefficient system.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest challenges, or how can we help educate the public at large, like the society at large, about some of these, like, not unconventional because they've been around for centuries in other cultures, but how in America can we make these practices more acceptable, more widespread?
It's challenging because a lot of times people don't want to break off of what they know. And so for me, to stop relying on Advil as much and start going to more of the massage therapies, it required having a friend who worked at a massage therapist's place. In order to increase public knowledge, either having the insurance policies cover the cost of massage therapy first, and after that they can cover the cost of opioids, or if they, a lot of times all it takes is a famous face to say something for people to listen. And so, even during the Olympics, when Michael Phelps had all the octopus attack marks on his arms, the Chinese fire cupping, that brought attention to it. Not a lot of people had heard of it before, and that brought a lot of attention to it. So through athletes, celebrities, just paying a little bit of, or like getting them to promote it as well would really help the cause, I think.
That was going to be like a follow-up question. Are insurance companies covering any of those therapies, to your knowledge in your research?
I believe that they cover physical therapy.
Sure.
And there's workman's comp that covers some massages at some places, but it's not a universal thing for everyone.
In any of your interviews or your research, did they speak to providers educating patients prior to a big surgery, educating the patient on not just what to expect as far as pain, but some of the alternatives to heavy-duty medication?
I'm not sure if this is going to answer your question.
Okay.
I don't believe so. But I have a friend who recently had a surgery on her lungs, and she was so afraid of opioids that she refused to take any.
Yeah.
And she stayed in the hospital, and she didn't want to take any of the opioids because she didn't want to deal with addiction or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't entirely sure what your question was addressing, so I don't know if that answered it or not.
Okay. I think I just see that as a big opportunity, or maybe a place where maybe a real change could be made, maybe
Yeah.
for preparing the patient better for what to expect. And great. In your written defense, there was a couple of paragraphs about Narcan. And one of maybe the women that you interviewed suggested using that as part of the, like, prescribing Narcan, the reversal agent, when she prescribes opioids. And I wondered what your opinions were about that.
Based on the research that I did, Narcan, for you guys, it's a nasal spray that when used immediately reverses the effects of an opioid overdose. And so I believe a lot of times it can send a patient into shock due to how quickly it reverses it. And so I don't think that giving it as like, you might overdose, so here, have this, is a great idea. Like, I don't like that that's what we've come to, but it's a better solution than letting them overdose, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. I really appreciated you focusing on this topic. You did a great job.
Thanks.
Hi, aloha, Kaya.
Hi.
Good evening. First, congratulations.
Thank you.
I mean, it takes patience. It takes patience and commitment to be able to produce something like this. So you mentioned in your paper about doctors not knowing how to say no. And so they just possibly give away this medications, pain medication. So let's put that in context, because we are in Hawaii, where a lot of people, including me, are from different cultures. And some of those cultures, actually, it is important to say yes. It is polite to say yes, and it is welcome. And it's rude to say no, especially to people of authority. And in a client and doctor-patient relationship, it is the doctor who is the figure of authority. So I feel like you have to revisit that statement, because it's like presented in a sort of a truthful manner, like there's no counter evidence or counter argument about that. And I feel like it's a different setting. We are in Hawaii. And how do you account culture into opioid epidemic? And so my question would be, in the course of your research, have you ever find any articles or any resources, any written materials that actually take into account culture? Because your purpose for this study is that to be able to come up with non-invasive alternatives to pain management. So have you encountered research that take into account culture into the opioid epidemic? And did you find any statistics particular to Hawaii? Because we live in Hawaii. Hawaii has pretty much particular demographics as opposed to any other places.
For the first question, I did not go specifically into different cultures. I will have to look into that when I get home tonight. And for my paper, I wasn't really putting the focus on Hawaii specifically. I was trying to look at it more broadly and look at it from an not an American, but as for all of America, so that it can apply to multiple places wherever I go. Yeah, people aren't like, okay, this applies to Hawaii, but not to where I live.
So I mean, so the next, I have another question. This has something to do with big pharma. You mentioned about this. My question would be, have you thought about incorporating this angle in your recommendation suggestion part? Because you've like sort of mentioned it passing in your paper that, you know, there's some sort of collusion between the big pharma and the doctors, but in the suggestion part, it isn't it isn't addressed whether would it impact, would this particular issue pave way to something that's related to your topic?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase?
Yes. So I'm asking have you thought about incorporating the big pharma doctor collusion in your recommendation suggestion part?
I don't think so. I think in this I kind of portrayed big pharma to be the bad guys, kind of, and so I don't see them helping out in this solution very much. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much.
Hello, Kaya.
Hi.
First of all, I just want to say your presentation and your paper were so exquisite. I mean, you did a level of research that I think is so far beyond the high school level, and you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you.
So my question to you is, there's so many doctors out there, and they went into the field with a heart to help people. So is there any research on why doctors are prescribing something that's potentially dangerous at a dangerous level, as you have described in this presentation? And we mentioned the financial aspects, or perhaps the pharmaceuticals incentives and things like that. But is there any research where people actually ask doctors who believe that opioids are helpful in a certain area, and why do they prescribe it? And then perhaps if it's something like they're so rushed and that's the only thing that they have, or if it's something they actually believe is helpful, if we find that source, perhaps we can find the solution. Do you have anything on that?
I don't have particular resources on it, but I can acknowledge that opioids are very impressive and they're incredible and can help substantially with a patient's pain.
Yes.
And so I can see a doctor that would view it that way, that yes, it does have a negative side effect, but so does everything else these days. And so everything has to have a side effect, and it depends on how strong the patient's will is against addiction. I can see someone seeing it that way.
Yeah, I can see that. Do you know statistically how many people become addicted to opioids versus how many people are prescribed opioids? I mean, how big is this problem?
I don't know that specific statistic off the top of my head. I know that, especially in public schools, the problem is extreme. I have multiple coworkers, old classmates that I know that use all these opioids just to feel good, just for kicks, just for fun. And it's not because they're experiencing intense pain, it's because they don't want to feel anything. And so
Yes.
I know that they weren't given a prescription for it, but they do come into possession of it.
Right. Good. Yes, I think you presented that portion very well, that it can get out to a public that was not intended for them to get.
Yeah.
So I think that's two sides of the problem. The people who were prescribed, and are they overprescribed and they're getting addicted, and the distribution to minors especially. So I think you did a wonderful job on that portion. So thank you so much, and thank you for sharing your personal story as well. I appreciate that. Good. Great job.
We have about 5 minutes left. If anybody in the crowd has a question, feel free to raise your hand and ask away.
Yeah.
Patty, you were mentioning that pharmaceutical companies actually offer physicians different benefits from using their drugs or whatnot. Are these American-based pharmaceutical companies? So our government can actually come down on them, or are we getting them from all over the world? You know what I mean?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't know specifically the statistics off the top of my head of how many pharmaceuticals we get from America and how many we get from out of country. But I believe that majority of them do come from in America.
Did you do any research on once a doctor recognizes that their patient is definitely addicted, are they able to help them to calm down from those drugs? And I had a similar story to you that the doctor gave me oxycodone for literally nothing.
Yeah.
And I asked her, like, why would you give me something this strong? Ibuprofen is fine. And she had a really horrible episode and just made me very concerned and red flag that, wow, you just try to give me something that I really don't need.
Yeah.
But did you find anything where a doctor recognizes it and now they have a protocol that follows up with this patient so that they know that they're getting off of it?
A lot of it relies on the patient, but also if the doctor acknowledges and notices that they have a problem, they can help by not prescribing it anymore. They can help wean the patient off of the medication using the painkiller that I mentioned before, Subutex, which is non-addictive, or even medical marijuana can help wean patients off of their opioids. In fact, in Washington State, where it's legal, there's a 33% decrease in the amount of opioid abuse. Mrs. Wilkes?
You mentioned that there's like a clearinghouse database that doctors have access to, so they can actually pay attention to, say, oh, I'm prescribing something for Gail, I see she's already visited 10 doctors for the same thing. Probably I shouldn't be number 11.
Yeah.
Is there anything that mandates that doctors use that database, or is it completely optional?
I don't know if it's mandated, but I sure hope that they're checking it. Because not only could they be taking, getting 11 prescriptions for something, the same thing, but also they could be receiving medications that mix together poorly and can be detrimental to the human body. And so I sure hope that doctors all check it. Yeah.
You say that doctors were giving prescriptions to opioids because they were told that they were addicted. Now that doctors know, everybody knows now, are doctors still prescribing as many as they were before, and if they are, why? And number two is, what would be your solution to having insurance companies start to provide coverage for alternative methods?
I just got two questions. Hold on. So for the first one,
Are doctors still prescribing, knowing and why?
yes, doctors are still prescribing, and it could, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the reasons, but it could be out of habit. It could be a simple solution to a challenging problem. Sometimes, I don't know, I don't think the doctors are the bad guys here. I think it's a team effort between Big Pharma, the doctors, and the patients. But the doctor could be busy that particular week and just, here, have this. Yeah. And then, the second question was insurance policies, and
What is your solution to having insurance policies cover alternative methods?
well, Trump, I need your help here. Yeah, it have to be more than, me calling up an insurance policy or insurance agency like, hey, can you help me out? It'd have to be someone more than a Trinity student or a Kalaheo student or, yeah. Tori?
You obviously did a lot of research, so throughout the whole scope of research that you did, can you pinpoint like something that you thought was the most interesting?
Most interesting thing I learned. I think the most interesting thing that I learned was the fact about skittling and that this is something that's actually going on. Time's up.
Time's up.